Good evening. So good to see you this evening with us on this Good Friday. Could you turn to someone around you and say good evening to them for a moment? Do you mind? Yes, it is evening, correct? Isn't that right? It's not night. All right. So glad to have you. Also, say to them, Christ gave himself for you. Could you say that to the person next to you as well? That's what we're talking about tonight. Yes. So sometimes on Good Friday, we kind of struggle with the words, don't we? A little bit as to how to greet one another and what to say. So, we want to say, well, happy Good Friday to people. And that's kind of like a very strange sort of mixture of words. It doesn't seem to quite go together. This morning, when Reba and I were getting ready to leave the house, and we got to talking about that, and we got to saying, so why is this Good Friday, right? When we are here to commemorate and to observe that of the crucifixion of Christ as well. Well, the Good Friday thing points us to that of the purpose of the cross, and that it is that roadway to our redemption. It is Christ giving himself in great love, the greatest love ever known to humanity for you and I as well. So that's where we get the good part of it. Goes to that of Good Friday. And so, but it is still strange to say Happy Good Friday to someone around you also. But we're glad you're here tonight for this observance. So I wanted to start out with a question for you as we begin our discussion for the next few moments. And then we were going to go to the Lord's table. The staff is going to serve you tonight as well. If you attend Hope, then this is a little different than normally the way we come to the Lord's table. But we wanted to make it very personal and intimate with you this evening. And then we're going to come back and worship a little more and then let you go on this Friday evening. So I wanted to start with this question is what is Good Friday all about? I think that's important for us to start there as well, because I think our mind, when we talk about Good Friday, it immediately registers with this traditional definition of the day that we have and how it falls on the liturgical calendar, and that is the Friday before that of Resurrection Sunday. And it's a day that we set aside to observe that of the work of Christ on the cross. And I think that those definitions, those thoughts are all doctrinally sound for us as well. But it also brought me to this thought of how powerful and how inexhaustible is the love of one to die for the sins of many. And I wanted to set in that for a moment. The love of one to die for the sins of many. And I think when you kind of put it in that way and in those words, that it adds seemingly some weight to what we're doing this evening and why we are here together on this Good Friday. Because I think it's very easy for us to just frame this historically or ecclesiastically, as far as that of being just a church observance also. But this thought of one dying for many, I think, just kind of redefines it for us this evening. That Jesus dies at the hands of both Jews and Gentiles, forsaken from the garden itself in the book of Genesis by his very creation. And you say, Mark, I get all of that, and I understand why we're here and why this is on the church calendar, and I understand all of that, but here is what I'm looking for. How does the crucifixion and the resurrection make me a better person? I think that's where we are perhaps at in our life. How does this make me a better person? And this conversation this evening has to be about how these events weigh into my life. How does this help me in my day-to-day life, on my job and with my family, and being maybe a better spouse and a better parent? How does this all weigh into those things within my life? And what I realize when I look at the cross and I think about why we're here tonight, in the middle of the carnage of the crucifixion, that we discover hope. And it's not a hope that is propped up for us tonight by some unfulfilled promises or possibilities, but it's a hope that's founded in an immutable fact this evening, that Christ gave himself without coercion. Understand that. That he gave himself without coercion as well. That no one forced him to the cross, but he was driven there by love for people like you and I. for those of us that get it right some days, and for those of us that don't get it right some days as well. So let me kind of clear the room. If you come here and you have sat under our teaching at times, we do this at times to kind of break the ice in the room. So when it comes to your relationship with God, or just how you treat your fellow man, or how you conduct yourself in your family, we're not going to get into details. So how many of you has at some point this week you just didn't get it right? Raise your hand if that's you. Okay, good. We're in the room. I'm not looking at you, so I'm not taking a poll, right? But you just didn't get it right. You said something that you just didn't, you regretted, or you did something as well, or you didn't do something, you didn't follow through. So there's been this moment. And here is the beauty of the cross and the crucifixion, that he went to the cross without coercion, out of great love for people like us that don't always get it right. And that's the beauty of Jesus. That's the beauty of the Good Friday observance, and why we are here this evening together. So here is the thought, that the Father didn't wait on you and I in some futuristic version of you and I when we get it all right and we get every day right in order to send his Son. He waited, I think, and he sent his Son Jesus at an appointed time. We know that from the book of Genesis. When we were at our very worst is when he came into our lives. That's the beauty of the cross, and that's the beauty of the work of redemption within my life and your life as well. But you say, but Mark, here's the thing about this whole cross thing and crucifixion thing in Jesus, and that is that I'm here because this is part of the liturgical calendar and part of church, and that's why I'm here this evening. But there are places that, I might want Jesus in my relationship, but there are places where I don't want him. There are places in my heart that I might want to give Jesus some access to, but then there are places in my heart that I don't want to give him access as well. But when I look at the cross, and when I realize that he came of no coercion of anyone, but gave himself freely for people like you and I as well, then what I realize is such a powerful and a great love. It is such a love that you can place no value on in this world, because there's nothing that valuable as well, that is very difficult and absolutely, I would say, impossible to keep him out of all those places in your life. Understand that. So if you're here tonight and you're saying, well, I'm here to experience Jesus only at a certain level, that I just want to kind of experience his love at just a certain level, a little taste of that this evening is what I want, then what I want to say to you is it's such a powerful and an amazing love that he came and gave himself for you and I when we were at our very worst in this life. Understand that. And he withheld nothing. So it's not the kind of love that you can just come and take a little bit of in your life. Understand that. So maybe this evening what you should do is just slip your shoes off, take your socks off, and just jump right in, right? No, keep your shoes on, okay? That was just a thought for a moment, right? And that wasn't even in my notes. It just came to my head. But maybe it's this moment where you're going to say, oh, you know what? I've gone through life, and I've tried a lot of things, and I've been through a lot of relationships, and I've experimented with a lot of religions as well, and maybe tonight is the night that I just jump right in with this love that is unexplainable from this Christ that you're talking about. And yes, that is the purpose of Good Friday, and that is why we are here this evening, to share together. Because as we have been teaching during this season through the imagery of the resurrection, that last week we talked about characters that would, as we touched on Judas, that would attempt to try to marginalize our relationship with God, and they would try to just give Jesus access to certain parts of their life as well. And we saw with Judas how that does not work within our own relationship with him also. And so what I want to say to you is that as we look at this story tonight from the book of John, chapter 19, we find another character in this passion narrative by the name of Pontius Pilate, who tries to do the very same thing. And what I learned about Pilate, as we learned about Judas last week, is this amazing thought that he could not prevent God from loving him. Last week, we saw that Jesus washes all of his disciples' feet at the Last Supper, and he washes Judas's feet and Peter's feet as well, and Thomas, who doubts him as well, he washes all of them. And what we see about Pontius Pilate in this text this evening together is that nothing that Pilate can do can prevent God from loving him through his son Jesus. It's a powerful story, it is. So it's John chapter 19, verse 1. A few verses, and I read to you here and in another place as well. And it says, then Pilate took Jesus and he flogged him. He whipped him. Why does he do that prior to the crucifixion? And what we realize historically is this, that Pilate never saw the crimes perhaps that Jesus had committed or was accused of committing. He never saw them worthy of a crucifixion. So he thought that perhaps flogging Jesus would be enough. So it says that then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. And they came up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and struck him with their hands. And when I read this, I thought about him wearing this crown of thorns, and I thought about him wearing this purple cape or sash. And I thought about this, and they hail him as King of the Jews. And I thought that even though they're doing this as a way to mock him, and this is mockery, but really what they're doing is they're speaking the truth because he is a king. He is a king. There's no denying of that. So I thought about this as you came tonight, and perhaps that you're wrestling with his authority over your life. Then the question is, then what kind of king are you looking for? Because when I look at Jesus, what I realize is this, that they are crowning him with a crown of pain, but he is the Prince of Peace. And I wrote these things down, that he wore a Roman soldier's cape, and it was probably a worn out cape that no Roman soldier wanted to wear at all. They cloaked him with this cape, but yet he's the King of righteousness. That the soldiers struck him, but yet he's the good shepherd, the protector of the sheep, the one that would lay down his life for the sheep as well. And you can't walk away from that kind of love, because what we see as mockery from these Roman soldiers is actually truth, that he is a king. But Jesus is not the king that the crowd that was jeering, "Crucify him," wanted to be. That's not the kind of king that they wanted, because Jesus is a king whose crown is a crown of suffering, and his throne is a cross, and his robe is a sin-stained cape of a brutal Roman soldier. His power is displayed in humility and suffering. And the crowd is saying before him that we don't want that kind of king. That's not the kind of king that we want as well. We want a king to come, and we want a king to drive out the Romans. We want a king that will reign over the physical kingdom of Israel, but we don't want a king that reigns over our hearts. And I think we find ourselves in this walk, in this life, that way at times as well. That we want to acknowledge Jesus as King, right? We want to say that he is the Son of God. We want to say that he is deity as well. We even want to acknowledge that he died on the cross for our sins. But I don't want him to be the ultimate king of my life. And that's exactly where those people in the crowd were that day, as they stood before Pontius Pilate in this mock trial as well, that they were saying that we don't want that kind of king. We don't want a king that reigns over the areas of our own hearts as well. But when I look at the crowd that's before him, what I realize is this, that everyone in that crowd has a need. Everyone has a need in that crowd that day. And so I begin to look at the text, and I wanted to read a little further in John 19. So here's what it says in verse 9. It says, and he entered, talking about Pilate. He entered his headquarters again, and he said to Jesus, Where are you from? But he already knows that he is Jesus of Nazareth. But what he's doing, he's looking for a way out of this dilemma that he finds himself in with Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me. Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" And Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all unless you had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." And from then on, Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Anyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." So when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat, a seat called the stone pavement, and in Aramaic is Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour, and he said to the Jews, "Behold your king." Look what he says. And they cried out, away with him, crucify him." And Pilate said to him, "Shall I crucify your king?" And the chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar," is what they said. And these are Jews that are living under the brutal occupation of Rome, and they say that we have no king but Caesar, and so he delivered him over to them to be crucified. So I have this question then who is your king? We all have at least one. Who is your king? We all have at least one. I think this statement by the chief priest, and the chief priest answered, "We have no king but Caesar," is one of perhaps the most emboldened statements that you'll find in all of Scripture and all the Passion narrative as well. Because here is the thought. They, the chief priests, the leaders of the temple, they're waiting for a Messiah king to break the hold of Caesar over all of Israel. Yet they proclaim their allegiance to this cruel, idol-worshiping Caesar, the king of Rome. Because what is before them is what they actually need, but yet they can't see it because they're blinded by their own pride and their own positions. Because the king that they need is right before them as well. So I thought this week, there are so many things that are right before us that we don't see them, right? So have you ever grabbed your cell phone and you call somebody and they say, "Hey, how are you?" And you say, "Fine." And then they say, "What are you doing?" And then you say, "I am tearing the house apart looking for my cell phone. And I can't find it anywhere," right? Yes. Now, I don't want you to raise your hand on that one, okay? But you understand what I mean, right? It's like trying to find the elusive remote to the television. Have you ever noticed how they hide, right? They do. And you look everywhere for them. You look in the refrigerator because you think that you might went to get something to drink or a snack, and you laid it in the refrigerator. I have found ours in the garage. We don't have a TV in the garage. I just took it out there for some reason, remember? And we're looking everywhere for the remote, and it's laying in the garage because I went out for something and I laid it down out there. Or have you ever looked for the TV remote and found that you were sitting on it? Did I hear a yep from someone? Yes? Okay, see, there you go. So now you're connecting with this, right? It's what's right in front of you. I have this habit of going to the refrigerator, opening it, looking for something, and I can't find it. It is not there. I know it's not there. I would stake my life on it. It's not in that refrigerator at all. And I called Reba and I said, "Reba, I can't find it anywhere." And she just reaches in and grabs it, and there it is, right? And it's right there in front of me. I think about this day. These are priests that serve in the temple. And the Messiah, the King of Kings, the creator, the sustainer of the universe, is standing before them. Now he is crowned with a crown of thorns, and he is draped with a purple Roman cape from a soldier who perhaps had worn it out and no longer wanted it, is over him, that he is beaten and he is bloody and he doesn't maybe look like a king, but what is standing before them is exactly what they need, but yet they can't see it. And I think for some of us, and maybe some of you in the room, this evening is as well, that maybe you've come to church for year after year or week after week after week, and you're searching for things when you leave here, and all along is what you need right in front of you, and that is Jesus. Right there. But the struggle is this: to accept him would mean that you have to submit to the authority of a king. Isn't that right? You can't call a person a king over your life unless you have submitted to him as a subject and to his authority. And the reality is that to call him king, you have to submit to his authority. And what does Jesus want to have authority over in these chief priests and others in that crowd's life? What is it? Well, it's not necessarily that of Israel, because I mean, that is who he is. He is the king over all of the universe as well, but yet he desires to the lordship over their own hearts and their own lives, and that's what they fail or refuse to give up. That's it. That's the cross. That's the story of the crucifixion, is that he came to not just make us feel better about ourselves. It's not that he just came to make us more moral or ethical individuals as well. I mean, there's a lot of people that are very moral and ethical, and they don't have a relationship with Jesus as well. So there's got to be more to it than that. And the reality is that he came to be Lord over our lives and Lord over our hearts. And that's what they refuse to do, is submit to that kind of kingship within their lives as well. And so they reject him publicly. And so what I wrote in my journal this week is the essence of sin is not necessarily the act. And I think that sometimes we see sin in our life is that the essence of sin is not necessarily the act, but the rejection of Christ. That is what we see here as well. But here is the beauty of the cross and the work of the cross in our lives, that Christ will die for all sin, even the very sin of rejecting him. He even covers that very sin itself. And that is the basis for all sin, isn't it? So that is the beauty of the work of the cross within our lives as well. So when I saw this crowd, what I realized that everyone in that crowd had a need but Jesus. Everyone. So I made a list for you. Those who cry out for Jesus to be crucified need a king like David to end the Roman occupation. Pilate needs a solution to this dilemma involving Jesus in the crowd. Everybody needs something there that day. The temple leaders need a Messiah. Peter, wherever he might be, the denier, needs forgiveness and relief for his guilt at some point. Thomas, the doubter, later on is going to need some proof as well. Judas has his own situation as well. And so I ask you, when you came here this evening, so what is your need? What do you need? Well, Mark, I'm glad you asked, right? Because I need some help in my marriage, or I need some help with my family or my children. I need some help with the guilt that I'm dealing with in my life because of my past. I've made some really poor decisions. And so you came here and I asked you, what is your need? And what I realize is this, that this crowd this day would represent a lot of aspects of us tonight as well. So what do you need? And I would say to you this evening that when you look at all of this, that could it be that even though those needs in your life are very valid and absolutely valid for you, and I'm not dismissing them at all, that it boils down to the fact that you need him. That's it. Because that crowd, they thought they needed a king to liberate them from the Romans. Pilate thought he needed a solution to this dilemma with Jesus. The temple leaders said they needed a Messiah. Peter needs some forgiveness and relief from his guilt. Thomas needed some proof at some point, and Judas has his own huge sets of needs as well. So Could it be possible when you look at all of those needs that really the common denominator is Jesus? It's him. It is him. So Pilate says this. So he delivered him over to them to be crucified. So he delivered them over to them to be crucified. So I want to end with this for a moment with you before we go to the Lord's table together. So imagine yourself in the crowd that day. Imagine yourself standing there with that group. And you see Pilate in his Roman regalia standing there in all of his pride. Not only was he the governor of Judea, but he was the prefect. He was the judge of Judea as well. And so he's standing there. And next to him is Jesus. And Jesus is wearing a crown of thorns that had been driven into his head. So his face is drenched in blood. That he is wearing a worn out cloak of a brutal Roman soldier. He's been beaten. His face is swollen. And he stands there silent. Why the crowd jeers, "Crucify him," he stands silent. Then Pilate asked the question to the crowd, "What will you do with him?" And the crowd shouts, "Crucify." And then the religious leaders utter that statement, "We have no king but Caesar." And in the middle of all of this, Pilate struggles to remain neutral in the middle of all of this. But here's the truth about this setting. Nobody in that crowd managed to stay neutral, not one single person. Because when you stand before Christ, when you stand before that kind of love, of one man dying for the sins of many, it is impossible to not be affected by it. You can't stay neutral. C.S. Lewis says that we can't just admire Jesus, we have to decide. And in John 19, everyone makes a choice. Pilate, the crowd, the religious leaders. The real question is, what will you choose? C.S. Lewis says the cross leaves no ground for neutral ground. Jesus is either a lunatic, a liar, or the Lord. There's nothing in between. There's nothing in between. No one in this passage stayed neutral. And I would say to you tonight, before we go to the Lord's table, it is impossible. And I use that word with all sincerity. It's impossible for anyone in this room to stay neutral. It is not the way that God designed the world. So you have to do something with him this resurrection season. So the question is this: what are you going to do? For you to trust him, to lean into him, to submit to him as king of your life and your heart, and to trust him. So can I pray with you for a moment? If you just take a posture of prayer, however that looks for you. And just allow me to pray with you for a moment. So, Father, what we realize in this room, there is no neutral ground. That when we are faced with this kind of love, Son Jesus, that there is a position that love places us in that we have to act. We just can't ignore it. So, God, for those in the room this night that need to make a decision to accept your forgiveness and the work of your cross, then let this be the moment that they act. Because we all stand before the King in his love tonight. And we must do something with it. So we submit to you this evening. We submit our lives to you and our families and our hearts and our minds. And we give you thanks. So for a moment before we go to the Lord's table, if you've never made a commitment to Jesus, and you may not even understand all that means, but you're drawn by his love for you, that one would die for the sins of many, then tonight, confess to him that you're broken and confess to him that you have a need for him. Confess to him that you are a sinner, as we all are in this room. And accept his forgiveness into your life. And confess that he is your Lord. And tonight will begin a journey for you that is transformational. So trust him this evening, because you have to do something. You have to either yield to him, or you either have to turn away from him, because there's no neutral ground here. So, Father, speak to us. Speak to us in our hearts. May we be drawn to you by your love this evening in your name. In your name we pray. Amen. Hey, thanks for joining us today and spending this time with us. Before you leave, would you take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel or go on Facebook and comment there so that more people have the opportunity to hear this message. Also, if you'd like to further engage, go to our website at hopeandanderson.com and subscribe to our newsletter as well. We'd love to see you on campus sometime. Our services are at 9 and 11 a.m. and we would love to have you here in person. So again, thanks for your time and have a great day.